All right. Well, that brings us to noon. So, welcome everyone to our Lunch and Learn today. I just want to start by acknowledging the fact that many of us are here in Manitoba, which means that we are on the traditional lands of the Anishinaabe Innu Dakota peoples and the national homeland of the Red River Métis. If you're in Winnipeg, your drinking water is coming from Shoal Lake 40 First Nation, which is located in Treaty 3, and our hydroelectricity, which we're using today to power this, is coming from lands all across the province and beyond, but specifically from Treaty 5 territories along the Nelson River. So we're grateful to be on these lands, and I hope that everybody thinks about these land acknowledgements, not just as words, but also how do we incorporate these into our daily practice. I also just want to draw attention to two things that are coming up that are pretty exciting. We've got our Building Resilience Gathering that happens every year. That's coming up in April. So if you haven't marked your calendars, please do. I just put the dates in the chat. So we're focusing on embodied carbon this year. So there's going to be 2 afternoons of presentation and 1 evening of in-person discussion. So it'd be great to see you all there. That's the King's Head, not the Kind's Head. My typo, sorry. Classic. And then also we have a fun award show evening, a chance to, again, gather together coming up on March 25th. So I'll add that link right after. But you're not here to hear me talk about these things. Those are for the future. I'll pass it on to our lovely speakers who are going to take it from here. Thanks everybody for being here, and thank you so much.
Great. Thank you so much, and thank you for having us. And so I'm joined here by Anthony Stratman, one of the core members of our team, who does the kind of really hardcore energy modeling that we'll be talking a little bit about, and Shafquat Rana, who is a PhD candidate. And so right now, Shafquat, perfect. All right. So what we're going to be talking about is combining solar photovoltaics, heat pumps, and thermal batteries. And the reason that we're doing this, the reason that this is finally becoming a kind of a technological team up that makes sense is solar photovoltaic costs have been dropping, and probably all of you are aware they're now extremely inexpensive. So when I got in, started working in solar for my own PhD, our goal was just to get the modules down to under $1 a watt, because then some things would start to become economic. And right now the spot price is around 7 cents a watt in China. And so the cost of PV modules are so low that it's the lowest cost form of producing electricity in history, which makes a lot of things possible. And so from an electrical standpoint, through most of North America, if you have a choice between grid electricity and solar electricity that you do, say, behind the meter, and you use all of it, you're going to be able to produce electricity for yourself less expensively than the grid. But the problem arises, of course, in that when you produce that electricity, you may not need it. So if you're doing a lot of work right in the middle of the day when the sun is shining, that's great. But if not, if you need power, say in the middle of the night or deep in the middle of the winter, then you might not be getting what you need. And so there needs to be some sort of time shift in how we're doing it. And what we've been up to, kind of as an industry, is moving towards electric batteries, which is nice. The electric battery costs are also coming down, and now having distributed solar production with distributed storage makes economic sense in some places, but not nearly as much as solar as a whole. And as utilities have been moving away from pure net metering, where every kilowatt hour that you sell to the grid, you get the same price as what it costs you to buy from the grid. So that's how it used to be through most of North America, and that's becoming rarer and rarer. And so generally, there's a difference between what you're buying it for, which is very expensive, and then what a utility is willing to pay for your solar generated electrons. And so you have to have some form of storage. And at the same time, even if we completely eliminate electrical production from fossil fuels on the Canadian grid, we'll cut emissions down quite a bit, but not nearly enough to meet our main goals. And so that means we need to start thinking about the other kind of three. If we're on a tripod where one leg of the stool is electricity, another one is transport, and the third one is heat. And electric vehicles are a great way to start thinking about moving fossil fuel related production for transportation towards renewable energy. But that's not what we're here to talk about today. What we are going to talk about is how we take on that third leg, which is the thermal energy leg. And so heat pumps themselves convert electricity into heat by moving it and are roughly 300% efficient. And so when you couple solar with a heat pump, you have a really efficient method of heating your building or your home. But again, same problem in that maybe you want to be warm all night long and the heat pump is only working during the day. So how do you take that thermal energy and store it for later? And that brings us to the concept of thermal batteries, which are not very popular in Canada at all. There's only a few. One of the first commercial systems we actually had ESA approved for the project that Shafquat is going to talk to you about. And so the idea here is to take solar energy and use it to electrify your home so that you can completely eliminate fossil fuel use for heating, while at the same time dropping your utility costs. And so without further ado, let me pass this over to Shafquat to talk about the project that we're working
on. Hello, everyone. Thank you, Dr. Pearce, for the introduction and everyone for being here. I'm Shafquat Rana, final year PhD candidate in electrical engineering at Western University. And I will be talking about the solar PV integration with heat pump and thermal batteries for residential decarbonization. I would like to start my presentation by proposing the retrofit system and new system modeling approaches for residential heating. The first system I want to talk about, as Dr. Pearce mentioned, is the integration of solar PV with heat pump, such that the PV electricity provides the electrical loads of the house and at the same time runs the heat pump. Here the system will be grid connected, but the priority will be given to the PV electricity, and based on the house demand, electricity will be either imported or exported from the grid. The heat pump, however, will supply the heating, cooling, as well as domestic hot water demand of the house with a backup of gas furnace or gas water heater. There are several advantages associated with this integration of these two systems, and there has been already proof in as a case studies or model simulation in the existing literature. One of the advantages being the electrification of the residential heating through heat pump, which increases the on-site consumption, thus increasing the self-consumption and self-sufficiency of overall system. And at the same time, it also decreases the greenhouse gas emission from the residents. However, we have a certain limitation to this integration of PV and heat pump. The intermittent nature of the solar PV generation limits the real-time load matching with the heating demand. And particularly in cold climates where the peak heating occurs during the period of low solar availability, this temporal mismatch again increases our reliance on electric or gas grid. This can be solved by adding a storage unit, which can help us shift this energy demand. With this said, I would like to propose the integration of a phase change material-based thermal battery to the existing PV and heat pump integration setup to overcome their limitation, such that the excess energy, that is when the thermal demand is low in the house or the PV is producing excess energy, rather than sending it back to the grid, it is stored in the thermal battery using a heat pump unit. The system would still have a backup from a gas furnace or a gas water heater. However, it will reduce its dependence on the natural gas grid. Next, I would like to move to the different types of system integration of this trio, that is PV, heat pump, and thermal battery, to obtain an optimal system. The first simulation or modeling approach begins with the same idea that PV electricity providing the electrical loads of the house and running the heat pump. However, here the dispatch strategy of heat pump is changed. So what's new here is the heat pump, the energy from the heat pump is being used to charge the thermal battery. And then the thermal battery would be providing the thermal loads of the entire house. However, there is a backup of gas water heater added to it. This would be a first step in eliminating the need of gas furnace from the house. The next system strategy is same. However, the gas backup is replaced by a electric heater. So this will give us a complete independence from the grid gas grid connection. The third system has two heat pump integration. The main heating strategies remain the same, but an additional backup air-to-air source heat pump is added to provide the space heating or cooling. If not enough, then the on-demand electric water heater will be engaged. The last system has the same strategies of the two heat pump, but here the air-to-air source heat pump is replaced by air-to-water source heat pump as a backup unit. Now I would like to talk about the real-time implementation of one of these strategies and system integration, that is PV heat pump and thermal battery, into a newly built house in Kilworth, Ontario. This project has been a collaboration between Western University and several industry partners. So the main aim of this study is decarbonization of residential sector, for which we have two side-by-side homes for the comparison. One is the fully electrified home with PV heat pump and thermal battery system. On the other hand, we have a conventional Canadian home, which is supplied by grid electricity and natural gas. For the comparison, the building envelope and structure of both homes are kept similar. Moving on to the details of the system in these both houses. First, we have the fully electrified home with 10.6 kilowatt of PV system, a 3-ton of air-to-air source heat pump, along with a 12 kilowatt of tankless electric boiler, and a 80i thermal battery, which is equivalent to 240-liter of hot water cylinder, and a backup of 5 kilowatt electric heater. And currently, this house is being occupied by 4 residents. On the second hand, we have the conventional Canadian home with a 3-ton of air-to-air source heat pump and a gas furnace of 60,000 BTU and a tankless gas water heater. But currently, it's just occupied by 1 occupant. Moving on to the monitoring of the systems in these houses. First, we have the electrical monitoring going on, which monitors the total as well as electrical consumption of individual equipment in the house. So for the both houses, we have one equipment each floor, so we can measure the total consumption of the electricity per floor, and we could also see the each equipment house load. Second, we have the smart inverter, which measures the PV generation. And the last one, we have the indoor sensors. The one in the middle, you can see it's measured the indoor air temperature and humidity and air quality inside the house. So using all these monitoring devices, we are collecting data at several granularity. As you can see in the video, the electrical monitoring devices are collecting the data in the live format, as well as different other. It can go down to seconds and collect data or show the data up to hourly basis. Next, we have the data from the smart inverter, which corrects the hourly solar PV generation and also shows the generation from each panels. It also shows the greenhouse gas emission saved by the generation since the system started working. Don't focus on that number because that's from the last year May data. So what's next? What we're going to do with these data sets? So whatever data we are collecting in the raw format from this, based on that, we are using to analyze the key performance indicators, starting from the total house load, PV generation consumption, grid import and export, as well as thermal load analysis. However, the important factor to look into based on this data set will be the greenhouse gas emission from the both houses, the comfort level within the house, economics of the system, and the comparison of the thermal battery with an electrical battery. Now, moving on to the initial results, the data collection started in May last year, and we are still under the collection phase and will be going on until the whole year's data comes in. And that makes sense. So based on the data collection from the last 9 months from the fully electrified homes, I have compared here two scenarios, like if that fully electrified home is to be supplied by with or without solar system. Currently, we have 10.6 kilowatt of PV system installed and is occupied by 4 people. So the result shows there is an average monthly reduction of 42% in the net grid import. This is because without solar, the whole electrical load of the house is supplied by the grid electricity, and with solar, it reduces them and not only increases the self-consumption, but also sends instantaneous excess energy back to the grid. The impact can be seen directly on the electricity bill for this fully electrified home, as the average monthly reduction of 43% with the installed solar PV is seen in the scenario when the with and without solar PV installation is compared. This certainly seems good, but what seems even better is at the same time it contributes to the reduction of greenhouse gas emission and helping Canada achieve its net zero emission goal. With solar, it can also reduce an average emission of 23%. Just to recap this last few slides, these are only the results of comparison of fully electrified home, which is with PV, heat pump, and thermal battery, with a scenario if the loads are to be supplied with or without PV installed. Next, I would like to talk about the evaluation parameters of the fully electrified homes and how does the raw data looks like after being processed. So as you can see in the graph, it's the data from May until January. The house loads increases as the winter approaches. That makes sense because the outside temperature gets down, and this year we had a very cold winter here in Ontario, London, Ontario, and thus the PV generation goes down and the grid import is increasing. Well, moving on to the goal of this study, which is the main focus, that is comparing the fully electrified advanced integrated home with a conventional home. For now, we have just 6 months of common data collection for both houses. And based on that, the net grid electricity for fully electrified home is close to 16,400 kilowatt hour, which makes sense because it's fully electric and it's occupied by 4 people, whereas the second house, it's only 3,200 kilowatt hour, but it also has 1,300 meter cube of natural gas consumption. But looking at one of the most important comparison between the house, which was initial goal of this study, the greenhouse gas emission reduction. So we can see a 70% reduction into the greenhouse gas emission between both houses. So the next step from here is that we would continue this side-by-side comparison of both houses and see how each system performs in the real world. We will be collecting the data for up to 3 years from these homes and analyzing them in terms of all the key performance indicators I discussed earlier and the areas of improvement we would find as we go further. It's also important to note here that the current experimental setup is not the final optimized system. It is one of the proposed model configuration I discussed in the beginning and first one to be tested. Over the coming years, on the insight we will get from this data collection, we will be developing, optimizing, and making our whole system, simulation system better. And based on that, if once we have our final optimized model, we would be implementing them in the new test homes. So with this said, I would like to end my slides and we will be very happy to answer any questions you might have. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. So as you probably noted, the one thing that became very clear as soon as we started collecting data is that we needed far more photovoltaics. And if you look at the roof, there was more space, and you'd say, well, why didn't we put more PV on? And that's because of a unique policy problem in Ontario that at the time we were limited to a 10 kilowatt inverter to be kind of considered like a what in the old days would have been a microfit, but basically a residential system that wouldn't have to apply for more paperwork. Since then, that number's been lifted up to 12 kilowatts, which is better. But realistically, for the kind of your average Canadian home to be fully electrified with all heat fully electrified and have be kind of like a net zero exporter or importer from the grid, you're looking at something like much more like 25 kilowatts. And so we need that number pushed up again if this is going to become kind of a widespread uh, thing that we're going to see in Canada. So I can see there's some questions in the comments. I don't know, Shafquat, if you can see them. Um,
I can also
yeah,
help you guys with the
okay.
questions if you'd like to. So if you just want to stop sharing your screen and then we can see our faces a little bit better, I'll add myself. All right, here we go. All right, so to start off, we have, were you able to see and measure any effect on peak power consumption with the thermal battery in your system?
Yes, we were able to because we are measuring all the electrical loads in the house. So yes, we could see that, especially because uh, these loads are more consumer based and the behavior. So we could see like when the solar is excess, that's basically the noon time. At the same time, the thermal battery is charging, and if after charging the thermal battery there is still extra PV, then it sends it back to the grid. And so yes, we were able to see that. To have the cost information of the two system. So basically for the building wise, it was same, but uh, just I think there was a difference of 10 to 8K, I guess. I'm not sure about that number. I have it's not on the top of my head, but yeah,
So the thermal part of the system was
yeah, the
roughly
thermal.
the same price as the conventional house. And this was set up to be a perfect experiment, and this were almost two identical houses right across the street from each other. And the only thing that's making our data interpretation more challenging is that we've got four people living in the one house that are all relatively young and very active, and the other house, one person who happens to be going on vacation a lot. So it's not exactly an apple to apple comparison, but for these systems, it's basically the cost of the PV system, whatever it is in your region, and roughly the same cost on the thermal side. And yeah, originally we were hoping that we would see substantially lower thermal battery costs, but it looks like that is like we're going to need to get to kind of scale the market within Canada so that it becomes large enough that there's more than one competitor, that you have local service providers and all that. This was very much an experimental system using only off the shelf parts, but like in the case of the thermal battery, it was the first one that wasn't part of an experiment either within a university or at like an industrial testing facility.
So just to confirm, the thermal battery was not an additional cost to the system? Like
The,
the systems are on par except for the solar?
yeah, and so
Okay.
you're paying the bulk of the additional cost is coming in from the solar, which
Thank you.
should be twice as big as what we used. Oh goodness, tons of questions. All right.
I can read off the next one. So it looks like the conventional house and fully electrified house are very different constructions. How do they compare in terms of design, heat load, heated square footage, and the building envelope construction?
So they're actually as close as we could get to identical. They look slightly different in the thing, but it was built by the same builder, same square footage. Everything is roughly the same. And it really was meant to be like a apples to apple comparison.
So in the picture which I showed, the house for the fully electrified house, because just I want to show the electrical panels, it's the back of the house, and from the other house I showed the front, but the square foot area for the both houses are same.
Okay. So if anybody has a follow-up question, you can unmute yourself and ask it or add it to the chat. we all have the ability to unmute here, so use it wisely. Anyhow, so the next question comes in. If heat is the desired use of the solar energy, what impact would PVT or thermal solar have on the calculation?
So we didn't look at PVT specifically for this, but I have looked at it before. And so the most expensive solar panel I've ever purchased was a PVT one that's out on the experimental farm here at Western. And the for exergy, which is like the useful energy that you can get per square foot of roof space, PVT is the best. However, PVT is much less common than just conventional PV, much more expensive per square foot. And so from a just a purely economic standpoint, it's not there yet. But you're right, we could absolutely use the thermal part of the PVT to say charge a thermal battery as well. And that would go, necessarily faster. But what we're really trying to get to here is we have this extremely cheap source of electrical production, but we don't want to spend it in, say, a bunch of Tesla wall electric batteries. Can we find another use for it where we could eliminate the need for natural gas coming to the house at all? And that's basically, we've proven that that's technically possible. And now, kind of Shafquat's future work is actually optimizing it. Then kind of going to the next question, what about cooling? The heat pump is awesome in that it's basically an air conditioner if you want it to be. And then you can reverse it to pull heat into the house or reverse the other direction to cool the house. And so the heat pump does double duty there. And that's part of the savings that you get in kind of like a conventional house. And so that savings, like the builder didn't want to waste. And so that's why even our conventional house has a heat pump, because it's acting as like a secondary heater, but really is an air conditioner.
Okay, great. Do you think you could provide some description? Oh, did somebody have? Okay. Can you provide some description of the thermal battery system, please?
So the thermal battery system we are using right now is ATI Cynam thermal battery, and it is equivalent to 284-liter of hot water cylinder. And I can share you the manufacturing sheet of that. I'm not sure what more
Right.
description you are.
Yeah, I can maybe, so it's about the size of a dorm fridge. It's a plastic box made up of a salt, which is more or less acting like a wax with a heat exchanger in it. And so the parts of the system that we're using extensively is we're charging it through that heat exchanger with the electric boiler and then pulling the heat off and putting it into the floor or for domestic hot water. And that particular system, the reason that we had to get it ESA inspected is it also has an internal heater. And so because that's electric and there weren't any in Canada before, we had to do a field inspection for that. And so now that's been approved. And so it's, safe to use in Ontario. I don't know if Manitoba, do you have the same ESA rules for everything? Like if you put in a solar system, do you have to have it inspected by ESA as well as your municipality and the utility? Does anyone know?
Anybody has the answer to that, please feel free to unmute yourself and share your knowledge. So many smart people.
Yeah, I could probably do that. The solar installations have to be inspected by whoever your electrical authority having jurisdiction is. So it would be either Manitoba Hydro or the City of Winnipeg.
Yeah, so when we do solar systems here in London, we get 3 inspections. So we're extra special that way. Much more efficient in Manitoba.
Well, thank you so much, Jeremy, for jumping in there with that question. That's really helpful. Or sorry, that answer. Okay, moving through the questions. What would you consider an optimized system? Are you looking at the maximum reduction of GHGs or energy costs or optimized payback period / return on investment?
So for the optimized system, I feel like it has to be ticking all these things, these boxes equally, like the emission, because the main focus is the sustainable and economical system. So we would be focusing on the greenhouse emission and of course the energy cost. And when you talk about energy cost, the optimized payback, of course, is included in that. So yeah, mostly all of that.
Yes. So, and this might be of interest to some of you. So if any of you have used Homer for doing like microgrid optimization for projects that you're working on, we have an open source one called Sama that we developed here at Western that's free and anyone can use it. So right now it's pure Python, so you have to the learning curve is fairly high, but we're just about to release an executable version, and that software tool you can right now use to do heat pump and photovoltaics. And what Shafquat and I were talking about before the presentation is we're going to integrate our thermal battery work into it as well. And so within the next, well, actually, by the end of summer, you will have the ability to do PV heat pump and thermal battery optimization. And in that case, it's economic. We're trying to, like, where we're saying you're not using any gas. And if you're not using any gas, what is your best sizing for all of the subsystems in order to be able to still fulfill your need for the utility that you're operating under at your specific location?
Well, when that's ready, please send it our way and I'll put it out through our newsletter and social media. So everybody on the call, please keep an eye open for that. Love to hear things that are free and accessible. That's wonderful. Okay, so moving along. In Manitoba, solo input and heat pump capacity is minimal in October to February. How does the system operating cost make sense in our climate, especially when there's no gas backup?
Yeah, so during that, so you're right. As things get colder, the heat pump efficiencies go down, but the lowest it can get is 100%. So it just acts like an electric heater then. And except on the most extreme day, that would not happen. So the vast majority of the winter, the heat pump is still giving you some thermal efficiency bang for your buck. And so during the winter, you're still connected to the grid. These aren't off-grid systems. You're still connected to the grid. You're using the grid electricity to run your heat pumps or your backup electric boilers. And then during the summer, you're producing generally much more electricity than you need. And that's why it's still it's still good to have something as close to net metering as possible from the economic standpoint.
Just a quick follow-up question there. What is the most extreme cold there that you're aware of that it wouldn't be working in? Do you know?
Oh gosh, it's like, is it minus 30 or so? It's something crazy. Like it's
Minus
where you
30?
spit and it freezes before it hits the ground, that type of a thing.
Oh, well, look, good thing you live in Ontario. What was it, minus 43 here the other day? So, um, all
Yeah, so
right.
you're going
So,
to electric backup heater for that. So that's when your heat pump is not doing much and you're just doing an electric boiler.
yeah, absolutely. Um, okay, so back to the permitting and regulations. Were there any permitting issues with the thermal battery?
Shafquat, do you want to handle that one? Yeah, so it was delayed. So all of these systems would have been online much faster. Everything about this system felt like something that was new for the inspectors. And so, but the largest part was the thermal battery piece. And so if you are planning a project for that, it's best to start ahead of time and, if possible, educate the inspectors so that they know what's going on. But now there's at least one example in Canada. Um, that you can point to, and we'll of course publish all the data and everything about it. But this isn't. There's no inherent danger here. Like it says, it's a salt, but it really does function like a wax. So in the absolute worst case scenario that it got cracked or something as it was being installed, you're going to get some wax on your floor. Like it won't blow up. There's no inherent risk to it at all. Much safer than an electric battery.
Good to know. All right, so assuming payback, ROI, generation capacity are competitive, is there enough HVAC expertise in Canada to install and maintain these new hybrid systems?
We desperately need HVAC installers to get up to speed on these. And so the ones that we got were from Scotland. And so so in Europe, PV is, very mature. Heat pumps are very mature. You can go to some place like Sweden where almost everybody has it. But even in some place like Sweden, thermal batteries aren't that popular. And so they're kind of being manufactured in Asia. And the system that we got was from the UK. But we definitely need people to learn about these systems. And so for everybody on the team, this was like their first go at it.
So,
Uh,
are there centers of excellence that are lobbying the feds in order to get training dollars into the polytechs and the engineering faculties?
That I'm aware of yet. So this is truly brand new in that this system will be the first one that we have any kind of field data on in the whole country. And so I'm hoping that that provides enough of an incentive to say, look, this is real. We've done the modeling and validated our model off of it. And now you can start to model systems in your own location and say, oh, look, this really makes economic sense. This is something that we should be pushing for. We should think about doing thermal battery manufacturing in Canada and really start, put one in everybody's house. At the very least, especially if they've, already say put solar on their rooftop.
yeah, and just as a follow-up comment to that, I know that in Manitoba we're facing some of these same challenges in terms of workforce, and I know that there's a ask out there from many voices, including the HVAC folks here in the province, for there to be an industry-informed labor strategy to try and address these things. So the everybody knows people are trying, but sometimes it takes more than just desire to get things in place. So hopefully that call is being heard loud and wide, and not just in Manitoba and Ontario, but beyond that as well. Moving on to the next question. Are the thermal batteries phase changing material or something like a sand bed?
So yes, the thermal batteries are the phase change material. It's basically SAT, sodium acetate trihydrate, with a couple of more things inside. So I think that answers the question.
Yeah.
Okay, so there was a request for more thermal battery information. So is there any additional details that you're like, I wish I'd said this, or oh, you
No.
guys got it all covered there, you think?
Yeah, I mean, Shafquat, if you can, you want to post the tech specs, we could put that in the comment list and everybody can get
Yes.
to.
So first, I'm sharing our web page for this project. So if anyone wants to follow up, they can follow up us on there, because I keep updating everything we do know there, and then I can share the.
Oh, perfect. Actually, yeah, that's perfect.
Okay, great. Sometimes the questions come in after you've already partially answered them, so just wanted to give the opportunity to expand. And thank you so much for adding that information into the chat. And I can send out an email afterwards to everybody with the links as well, and anything else that comes up. So, next question. Any passive solar used and data on the home sites?
Not not on purpose. So there'll be some passive solar just from the, southern facing windows and some little baby overhangs, but this wasn't in any way a optimized house. So it's basically type of house that they were trying to do and then like that they would do conventionally. And then we electrified it in every way we could. So all of the changes were to the electrical and thermal system, not to the building envelope design, which again, whoever asked that is absolutely right. That should be done first and then in the integration. But, you know, I don't know even if there are passive solar design slash builders available in Manitoba, but I know that we don't have one here.
Sorry, did somebody have something they wanted to say? Just want to give you a chance. All right. Next question. If twice the solar panels are ideally required to achieve the 25 kilowatts versus the 10 kilowatts of the study, it doesn't look like there's enough roof area to achieve that.
Correct. And so the way that this would have to be done is if you were optimizing a house for this specific application, you'd make a simpler roof that was almost all south facing. And so that would get you a little bit more area because you wouldn't lose area where you're cutting on the different sections. So that's a little bit more. But then there still wouldn't be enough. And so then you have to think about one of two, say, lowest hanging fruits, either awning over the driveway or PV fencing. And PV fencing is definitely my favorite one. And that if you're already putting a fence around your property and you're paying for the materials to do that, modules are now inexpensive enough that, at least in Germany, the PV fences are less expensive than wood fences. And so why not get some production value out of your fence? And so we've actually done some work on this previously and like posted some like PV fence, both mechanical and electrical simulation data that looks fantastic. And so that is a welcome, I think, opportunity to the Canadian market as well.
Are those PV fences vertical like wood, or are they slightly askew?
Vertical, vertical.
So I guess there's also opportunity for integrative PV on the walls as well then.
Absolutely.
Cool.
And we do have some demonstration of the PV integrated verticals on walls at the university here, and they work fine. And you sort of get exactly what you'd expect. Increased output from a perfectly tilted system during the winter because you're both getting the reflection and the sun's lower in the sky. So the albedo off of the snow, and then not nearly as much production as you might expect from a optimal tilt angle during the summer when the sun's high in the sky and missing it, so to say.
Okay. So back to heat pumps. Is the heat pump efficiency essentially cut in half if it is used for both storing heat and then later retrieving it? Is it working twice to ultimately heat the home?
No, so the heat pump, so it's only being used, yeah, we're not using the heat pump to move heat around inside of the house. And so that's just purely electric pumps. That's small, very, very tiny small power. The heat pump is only used to convert electricity into heat in order to be able to either heat the home or heat, like charge the thermal battery in another one of the cases that Shafquat's looking at. And so it's not being used a second time. Retrieving the heat is just an electric pump.
All right. So the key problem I have with my home is 50K solar CCASHP. For my home is the $350 thermostat that controls everything. How do we ensure that the system iOS is functioning as the system is designed? What is the best T-stat? Sorry.
Goodness, that's a great question that I don't know the answer to. Shafquat, do you have any guesses?
Oh, I'm sorry, I don't. I might have to look into this part. That's a good question.
So the one that we're using though, they like Jamie hasn't had any trouble with that, correct?
Yeah, she has some problem with adjusting the temperature, yes, but I think the one she was using is Van. I don't even recall that name. It's not, I remember it, but it's not on top of my head. I don't.
And I'm assuming T-stat is a thermostat. Oh, Dudley's here. He's got a follow-up question.
I just wanted to, yeah, I think that's the key thing that that I've been experiencing is when you recognize that you've got all this hardware out there and it's being controlled by a third party $350 thermostat that installers don't have much experience with, and it's controlling everything. So that's my concern is how we make sure that everybody that's installing this is I had very experienced people put mine in, but they had 1 3-hour course with the Ecobee, and that was it. And so I'm concerned that we're going through all these permutations to try and invent and install green systems, and we're not getting what we're expecting out of them.
No, you're absolutely correct, and that we don't have the technical staff hasn't been trained on how to implement the more complicated dispatch strategies. So in the long term, and this isn't a solution now, is that the dispatch strategies that we're using in the software in SAMA could be used as the control strategies on kind of the smart thermostats of the future. But yeah, that's the next PhD after Shafquat graduates to work on that. That's a really good point.
So just further building on the control pieces, what opportunities are there for optimizing the controls? For example, could you be running the heat pump harder during the day in milder temperatures and charging the thermal battery when the COP is better and then discharging it at night?
Yes, absolutely. So, and all of those things are physically possible, but haven't been implemented. And, you could also think about the cost of electricity. So if you have time of use charges, pick the best time to run the electricity. Look out ahead of what the weather is going to be like so that you're maybe pre-charging the thermal battery ahead of time, even with slightly more expensive electricity, because you're going to need it kind of going forward. And so all of that stuff absolutely is doable with the current controls and equipment, but has not been implemented by anyone that I'm aware of, actually.
So one of the things for this we would be looking as a future work would be a smart energy management system for the residential house, which can, in advance predict your house load based on the temperature and then instruct you when to charge your thermal battery and when to discharge it. Or if even like an option, if you want to use it right now as an on-demand, because if you need a shower at 12, you cannot wait until 8 to discharge it. So it might add some option that it would be on grid. So you already know that you're using it when it's not optimal, but there is a chance or a time it would provide you that could be optimized. So basically a whole smart residential system.
Yeah, thanks for answering that question. This is my question. Maybe just following up on it then. So what is the control strategy then for using the thermal battery?
So one of the control strategies which we were thinking to implement is like charge it when you have the excess PV available and discharge it when during the evening or the night, or you could discharge it when you actually need it. But you could need it at 2 as well, and you could need extra energy as well, because at the same time, you don't want to run out of hot water in the middle of shower. But that time, your control strategy would be you override the optimized one and you go back to the normal, supply. So you already know that you are overriding that control, but you again maybe organize it, maybe take shower in the evening, so you don't have to override that control, and then you will completely be based on the thermal battery discharge supply. So there are various approaches we are looking into right now as a smart energy management system for
And
this.
Yeah,
and some
I was just I guess I was just curious what currently is the control like the results that you have there,
Okay,
right? How is that battery being controlled? How does the system know when to charge it, when to discharge it? These sorts of things.
so for right now, what control strategies we have is on demand. So it's not optimized. It's based on the user demand. If the user wants it, it supplies it right away. If not, it's charge the battery.
Yeah, so one of the things to kind of think about in the future for these systems is that when PV first came in and it was off grid, people adjusted how they lived so that they could make use of the electricity when it was available and they could minimize their battery size. And then we went to kind of where most of the systems were grid connected and net metered, so it really didn't matter how you used electricity as long as your net at the end of the year was roughly what your solar was producing. You get the most money. And now they're moving away from it, so you get these differentials, and so that encourages you to use your solar energy when you have it. And so that maybe means, like, I don't know, running your dishwasher in the middle of the day, trying to do as much of the work that you can during sunlight, and then going to sleep early. Um, with this system, that gives you the ability to store some of your energy in a lower cost way than using an electric battery. So it allows some movement, some flexibility, but at the same time, there are tiny standby losses for the thermal battery. They're not too bad, but it's always in your best interest to use solar energy when you have it. And for certain, you want to charge the solar battery in the middle of the day, so you're using PV electricity and not grid electricity, and then keep your use in such a way that you're not completely running it out. And when it's used just for hot water, you can have a little bit of control. But if it's also doing double duty for space heating, then it's mostly the temperature outside that's running the show, not you.
Okay, back to the batteries. What is the thermal capacity of the salt battery?
It's close to 14 kilowatt hour, approximately.
All right. So, we've just got a question about the different amounts that the bills are throughout the year. So more expensive in January and getting credits in May to August. So is there a way to smooth out the curve of that fluctuation?
Not that I'm aware of. That's a great question. Maybe in the future there could be something along the lines of like an energy service provider that could provide that as a service, but not that I am aware of.
All right. Thank you. Darren, did you want to unmute yourself and ask your involved question?
Yeah, for sure. Sorry, would have been typing an essay. Probably still wouldn't be done. But I can probably shorten it just by speaking through it. So I recognize that a 10 kilowatt PV system for this doesn't have enough capacity to completely heat the home in the winter, or thermal battery plus home, whatever, however you want to look at it. But my comment would be, if you put 25, are you running the risk of kind of a negative return, because now you're going to produce so much in the summer when you don't need the thermal battery energized, that you're selling back to the grid at runoff rate and not using the actual power? So I guess my follow-up to that is, wouldn't it make more sense to just run an electric battery, and then you can use your electricity whenever you need it, whether it's summer evenings for lights, or have that bump up in the winter as well?
Now, that's a really good question. So there's two parts to it. So the moving to an electric battery is far more flexible in that you can even use the electric battery to say run your heat pump for heat. And so that solves some of the problem with, say, a large amount of solar electricity generated in the summer. But you're not you're never going to buy enough electric batteries to fully charge and say heat your house in the winter. Like that kind of seasonal storage isn't what you're going to get to. So for optimizing that system, it's going to depend very much on the electric rates in your area. And so if you're close to net metering, then you're golden. And the further you get away from net metering, the less solar you're going to want to put in to get to that optimal. And so what we were talking about was having a truly net zero energy home, and that all of your heating and electricity was coming from solar, and that using the thermal battery and the heat pump were one way to make that a more efficient system. Like you would need much more PV if you say just heated with an electric boiler. But you're right in that depending on where you are, that optimum is going to shift, and it might not be to fully electrify your home. It might be to do 90% or 50%. Again, depending upon the rate structure in your utility is really what determines that. And Sam, I can solve that for you. Even if I don't know the answer, it does, or will, once we get the thermal battery module added on.
Right. So just the general cost range of a battery system, and also what's the life expectations?
I'll do the easy one, Shafquat. You can do the hard one. So life expectancy is forever. It's literally a box of wax. Nothing should stop it. It should continue to work. 50 years, 100 years.
So for the cost, the battery we used right now was imported from UK. So the cost of this one is, yes, a little bit close to 7 to 8K, but I think it would, based on if we have good policy implications and things like that, maybe we can reduce the cost too, because when solar started, the cost was high and now it's down to 0.7 cents per kilowatt hour.
Excuse me, did the team, sorry to interrupt the question here. I'm just based on how expensive the phase change thermal storage is. Did the team consider hot water as a storage medium instead, as a less expensive option? I know Norway has the OSO hot water tanks, which store a lot of BTUs at elevated temperatures, and just seems like that's maybe a simpler sort of solution.
It's absolutely a less expensive solution. And we have another PhD student between Tony and I now working on a water tank with some PCM added to it as a separate submodule so that you can kind of get the best of both worlds. So in terms of cost of storage per, I don't know, unit meter cubed, water, of course, is going to win. But I don't want to give anybody I don't want to misguide anyone to think that PCM materials are actually that expensive. It's just wax. And the ones that are used for kind of commercial thermal batteries do have some additives to it so that it, solidifies and melts more easily and, doesn't have long-term problems associated with it. But again, that's not where the cost is coming from. For these thermal batteries, the cost is simply that it's small supply, and it's the way they designed it is to maximize space efficiency. And so there's an awful lot of metal in that thermal battery and the heat exchanger, and huge pressure drops. And so what I'm hoping, especially for the North American market, where it doesn't matter that it's the size of a dorm fridge, like most people have space for a normal fridge, say in their utility closet. So we can definitely get bigger. Most people could even afford maybe the space for another water tank. And so if we could get larger thermal batteries that are not using as much metal, the cost should come down very considerably. Because there's no reason it needs to be that expensive other than the heat exchanger on the inside.
Right. Well, this has been a very interesting conversation. Thank you so much, everyone, for all of the good questions and the incredible answers, the presentation. This was really interesting, and I really appreciated how dynamic it was. And for you guys to be on the hot seat for so long answering all those questions, I know that can be a bit overwhelming. So thank you so much, everybody. And we'll see folks again soon, hopefully at the Building Resilience Gathering, hopefully at the awards night. Lots of times chances to gather. And I can say from experience that when our sector gathers, lots of good things happen and great knowledge exchanged and great relationships formed. So looking forward to all of that. So have a great rest of your day. And I'll send out some of those links hopefully later today or tomorrow. So thanks again, everybody.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you.